So we're going to hear about the next presentation given by Amador Aparicio and Juan Carlos Fernández, who both teach in the Master of the University Castilla-La Mancha. Amador Aparicio is a computer or engineer, and Amador Aparicio is a lawyer. Okay, thanks very much for the introduction, and thanks to all of you who have stayed, and to the organizers of RootedCON for inviting us. I'd like to make it clear that both of us are the dads. My name is Amador Aparicio, and besides teaching in the Master of Castilla-La Mancha on cybersecurity, I am a bit strange here because I teach in vocational training in a school in Villamuriel, and since 2013 I've been collaborating with Telefónica in sort of the talent capture for startups, as it was called, and I have some colleagues over here, and I have been given the award of security envoy in that space, and if you want to get in touch with me, you have my profile there. I come here to complement what Amador is going to tell us. We wanted to do because he said when I'm doing an investigation, I don't know how far I can go in legal terms, and I think that's a common situation. You're doing your investigation and you don't know how far you can go. So I have a technical background besides being a lawyer. So I'm a guy who comes from the technical background but then decides to study law, and we are in a lawyer's practice which is quite specialized on this topic, and we want to give to the case of Amador the legal security. So I'm going to be his complement in that sense. Well, our case is a real case, and we want to bring this to you because our goal is to share our experience with you, because probably some of you will know somebody who is going through this, or maybe have gone through it yourselves. So there's always a catalyzer or something that launches an investigation, and this is a conversation in Instagram between two people. I don't know if you can read very well, but I read what it says, and then I'll give you some context. There's somebody who has an avatar, and it says, "Do you want one?" And we don't know what is it that's being offered, and the other person to the right hand side, yes, says yes, and you can't see too well, but it says, "Are you PS4?" And the other one says, "Yeah." "Are you legal?" "Of course." And we don't see too well, but it seems to be asking for access data to something connected with the PS4. So this person is going to give this access data to a portal of online gaming. So it gives them access data, and the other person that has asked for those access data is apparently not happy with the information provided by the victim. It's also asking for the access data to his Instagram account. And then there is another screen capture or evidence where the person feels that has been cheated, and so you are a bad person, and the person who has stolen the data is saying, I'm cool, I'm okay. So this is a conversation of the 24th of November 2019. It's either a Friday or a Saturday. So with this data, what the existing common law says is that if you don't have direct evidence, you have to prove certain prerequisites. And so this is a possible case of fraud, and we are looking at how the courts are handling evidence differently in the European Union. 85% of penal cases in the European Union have an electronic component, and even we're seeing the regulation of rights that do not exist in the Constitution, such as the right to a virtual environment. So we're beginning to have those rights acknowledged by our Constitution. So we start from an objective fact which has to be certified, and we need to see the intention to commit fraud, and we see that somebody promises something that's not going to happen. There is, I give you this, but I'm actually giving this for something else, and you use that information that I'm giving you to commit fraud against me. Somebody who is lying to you to obtain an economic profit. So you have to be able to certify that this has happened. So we have this case, and we want to look into what's really going on. And the first thing that we do, because we're not 20 years old, yesterday I turned 41, and Juan Carlos is not much younger. So we first of all analyze from which profile or account from the social network of Instagram are these scams being performed. And this is a profile, or rather was a profile, close gratis, and we've had to do some research. It has quite a typical avatar, because everybody playing Fortnite know what this picture is about. And what we see there is that there aren't that many followers, so that could be a profile that is quite recent, that has been recently created for perhaps a not very legal goal, and the sentence, the hook they're using is you can get close for free. So we believe that this can be used for people who play these games using the PlayStation 4. This could be quite an attractive offer, particularly for minors who are vulnerable. So if we look at this in internet, the first thing we do is we copy this name in Google to see what Google gives us connected with this name. And so we've started this investigation with the conversation that I've shown you from the 24th of November, and here there is a capture of the 21st of October of 2019, where somebody is warning about strange behavior of the person hiding behind this identity, who is apparently doing scammy things, and the social network is being encouraged to block this person. So beyond that, we have to know, because why is that close for free? Why could it be interesting for young people? So we've done some field work to see what this is about. Can you hear? Well, this is just a character in this game, Fortnite, and it has powers. It flies, but I have to be able to use this character. I have to buy, I guess, in order to play online with more people. And if I want powers or I want to pay another character, I have to make a payment.
It dances and everything. I know it's music before, but it's quite funny, the character. Okay, that's it. With that, my legal part will work on to sentences and two cases which come from the last year and this current year. What has the court has been saying? We don't have jurisprudence to sustain this and we can break the assumption of innocent through circumstantial evidence. What are the requirements? First, we have to prove the base fact. We have this scam conducted on a minor. We have to, which is already regulated, and it's a crime in the date it is committed. And in the technological part, the criminal goes beyond the legislation. We have some examples about that. We have to make a proof of evidence. Each crime has a series of elements. The scam has some parts, and those facts must be reported and recorded. Of course, there's an addition among the two evidences. It's to respect that chain of custody. One evidence must lead to another, and that chain must never break, because otherwise the investigations wouldn't have this the legal security that was mentioned before, that the facts are relational within the knowledge from a non-technical person like a judge, but it has to be clear what has been done and identify a person who will be researchers and to whom we could blame for the facts. We know that that account used from Instagram belongs to a character from a Fortnite character. This is very desired from young people and make them vulnerable. But one of the questions that we ask ourselves is the interest of someone trying to steal the access credentials to PS4 and not Instagram. What's beyond the PS4 portal? So what we did is to ask Google, and with that screenshot, I had to look for this because I'm not a player, I'm not a gamer. My favorite game was Snow Bros. I don't know if any of you know it. So I just made 3 million points and I passed the 52 screens and everything. And I was about to buy in PS4, but the thing is this: play to another level with online options. So it's a feature, it's a portal that lets you play from home with other players without being at home. So apart from that, we decided to create an account. For that, we put this on Google. It was a very complicated research on Google. The first term that comes back is the access page for the online gaming portal for PS4. From that, you could, without having the PS4 to create a new account, it requests a user and a password. So we created a new account, and we saw here that there was an option which was payment management. Apart from being able to play with people online, also there were money things in the middle. Maybe that's the interesting thing for an attacker regarding the profile of the victims, in order to access to stuff like payment management, as a credit card or debit card is bonded or linked to purchase powers or certain purchases in games. A payment method like a credit card, PayPal, or a virtual card. Here we didn't conduct the investigation to the fact that if you connect a payment method to afterwards you can disconnect the link and erase that from the payment, and we just tested it on this profile. And one interesting thing that we realized is that the portal allows you, even if another person knows the answer, there are 2 other authentication factors, and in this case this victim didn't have them enabled. So just to continue talking about legal stuff, we have to distinguish which is an evidence and a suspicion. We have to conduct engineering study to learn more about the investigation, but in order to prove it, there's not enough with that suspicion. It has to be an evidence which is over a suspicion. suspicion is just something subjective, so we have to just support that with an evidence. We're going to start by proven facts. I repeat what I said before, which is the rule of the logic. We have to create an hypothesis to be completely trackable, and the court has this plus when clearing a resolution, and to be motivated by the result. If there's no evidence and there's no conducting way, there are some indices. We have to test with the motivation and follow this logical process until it becomes can be punishable. That's what we are being requested, and that's what we're going to elaborate through this speech. Normally, this circumstantial evidence is a complex process. It's very difficult to obtain as evidence which leads us just to a single person, so that we can conclude the investigation, identifying a person or a group of people. We're going to investigate the facts. We're going to collect those evidences. How we supported this this chain of logics, which there are some facts that are being proven one after the other, so we can create that evidence, always keeping the same principle. We have to prove that the original evidence that is on that place is the same that the one that we use in the forensics. So we have to make a loyal trackability from the indices, from the evidence to the final fact, until we reach the identification of the person. I didn't dare to wear a tie. So every time that Juan Carlos speaks, there's a like sketch with a tie. And on the other hand, when I speak, there's another picture with no tie. So just to get into context, it's very good to repeat what we have said. We have someone who is hiding behind a fake profile in a social network, which is Instagram in this case. Taking advantage of this anonymity, he's trying to steal access data to the online purchase of PS4, which some of his victims may have failed to trust. And we have a minor who has trusted this person and has given him his data access data. And we have a parent, in this case a mother or a father, who is very angry because he believes that his son may be scammed, and this account may be related to his payment account, so that can be difficult. What could we do as parents? We could try to speak to the person who tried to scam the minor to return all the access data that has been stolen. That's the first option. We could beat him up, but we have to know who's the person, to send someone to just pick him up. We could just report it to the law enforcement agencies, but if we want to reach this step, we have to identify who's behind that identity. So let's say you're the person, or the real person who is behind that profile. And the investigation will be trying to identify a person who is using an Instagram account or a digital entity to scam other victims. Here we see that to put a name to a person, we have to run a test, and we have to build this series of logical tests and to be valid. In this case, if the particular individual provides it, it's not the same if the test is provided by an official body or a particular person. So here I'm going to talk about this resolution. This is quite recent. We all remember these Falcani papers, who worked in the Swiss banking, who took names of some opaque bank accounts. This person was arrested, and these evidences were added to the process, but those evidences were obtained illegally, And here the Supreme Court has specified, and which is something which is quite interesting for me, in which it's not the same if the evidence is provided by a particular or if it's given by the law enforcement agencies. So it's a difference there. So what you're going to try to prove is to go towards a fair process, to see which process, the consequences of the process for both the victim and the person to blame, let's say, if the evidence that has been given is legal or not. The grade one is to just violate a right, either for intensity, it's not vulnerating, it's more severe, let's say, and it's done so that those public powers don't abuse on obtaining those evidences. If public powers obtain those evidences vulnerating these rights, it's not legal. So that's why we have that distinction. So there's a difference between particular person and law enforcement agent. So Amador's case is enraged, and he wants to create an evidence to support a process. Maybe if that evidence won't be valid, he wants to negotiate. He wants to identify the person to recover those passwords. Let's see what he finds through that research. So finally, if he can present it as an evidence, because if it's started as a scam, we can also see what other penal crimes that can be found on the way. He could have said this before starting doing this. How many of you know someone, or have you been victim of a similar case like this? What could you think in the moment in which we are? With the information we have, we're going to look around Instagram to see if Instagram suffers information leaks, and to see which information can we obtain to add to the investigation. So one thing that happens to Instagram is that once you just create an account, and if that electronic email account is used or being used or was used, Instagram will tell you. You remember Glows Gratis? You remember the name of the account? Well, if we put, and you can check that, you try to create an account with that email address we just mentioned. We didn't mention email addresses, but where Instagram is giving hints for an email address being used in an Instagram account. It's a Gmail account. How many of you, every time you see an email Gmail address, it could be bonded to an Android device? Okay, many of you. The same happens with the username. Now, if I put an email address which is not being used or hasn't been used previously, even if the profile is not exist anymore, Instagram says we can use that email account. If it has been used already, you can see the difference between both, the one which has been used and the one who has not. The same happens with the username. If I think about using this username, it says I cannot be used because it's being used or has been used, even if the account has been removed. But if I put this one here, it says I can use it because it hasn't been used in an Instagram profile. We have an email account which has been used, glowsgratis@gmail.com, but we don't know if that account belongs and corresponds to this username. What would we do? Just in case we want to have more information. First, we're going to scratch on Gmail because it also has some leaks, information leaks. So before you continue, we have to take into account that in the end, when you provide evidences to a process, it's not valid if it's only me who provides evidences, but the other part doesn't have, because the other part doesn't have any knowledge about the process. So there's a principle of equality. So you can provide an evidence, and the other part will have the right evidence against my facts. So that's a problem that we can find. There's an there's a disleverage because everything has been digitalized. And very particulars who are providing this kind of evidence, creating misalignments in the process. So if the court considers that there's an inequality in the process, the other part can apply, saying that his or her rights have been vulnerated because didn't have, or he or she didn't have the right to participate in the process. Everything's based on this fair and equal process. Now he will start with investigation. The first, as you said, the title of the speech talk about the father. We're going to talk. We're talking about the fact of the email account vinculated or bonded to this Gmail account. So if we took the email account that was being used or has been used for a profile, even if it was removed, without even saying Google, it says it exists. It gives us information about an avatar, which is very similar to the one used in the Instagram, even if we are 100% sure. It gives us many hints and information. And apart from that, it seems that it's an email account which has been connected to electronic device from this model and this brand. So I can even find that is an account related to electronic device, and it could be the personal address of a person. So you can find the model and the brand of the device, and if that's not enough, we can see that the phone number of this device ends in 11. Did you know that did happen? Many of you knew this. And do you use Google? Okay. More interesting things. Now that we have scratched on Instagram and on Google, you know this because I wrote an article about this. We're going to get information from Instagram. We have to get this Instagram profile, and the cool thing would be to know if the account is real, and apart from that, if we could obtain more information. So from the evidences that we have run with intelligence techniques, we have found a tool which is very cool, which is proninjacopy.com, which actually it allows you to export information from account followers or the persons that you follow. It's a tool, a very interesting tool, because if you check the information, it says that you can download information that related to business fairs, let's say, from business accounts, business email accounts, and it seems that the business model, I think that Juan Carlos may see, if an email account is not business and it's personal, I think Instagram has some kind of issue there. And if apart from that, it's able of giving you the phone number of a person who has connected it to Instagram, because Instagram offers you the opportunity to create an account, and if you want to provide an email address and to create your profile, if you prefer, instead of an email address, you prefer to give your mobile phone number, I think that this tool may give you this personal data with just justification. That's why you understand now we are all with the data protection regulation on our hands, because there are some justifications here, and the justification of the tool is that it will give you the professional information of the company. But let's see if the data provided, that's the justification that this tool gives to obtain this data. The test that we have run is that you can download information from the people that you follow or the people who are following you. So the free version lets you scrap information from the first 20 people who are following you, or the first 20 people that you are following. But if you pay, which is not, you pay an amount which is not very big, with $20, $29, you can expand that to 30,000 profiles that you follow, or information about the profiles that you follow. You cannot do it from this precise profile, but you can do it from people who follow them to get information about the profile that you want to investigate. I have to run some tests with my profile, and it seems with another profile. So this is very curious, because all the information that this tool will download, even if they are personal data inside, that information will be stored in Google's cloud. So those personal information can be skipped by Google. I don't know if this corresponds to the terms of use from Instagram. I don't know if Instagram lets you know about this process. We don't know about that. But some things that were surprising while doing some scrapping about the people who follow me. Just see, apart from the people who are in my workplace, there are email accounts. This is a Gmail account. I don't know if this is a corporate or a business address. It seems that this person has connected his or her telephone number in the creation of the Instagram account. You can see also here this is a joker. It's more like a personal account. So this tool is giving us many information. I have 129 followers, but you see that out of 8 there are 4 telephone numbers, so it's more or less half of it, but I didn't do a trend of all of it. Once I have all these, the question is, if I spend some money, I want to get one of the followers from that profile which is scamming these minors, and let's cross fingers, and let's see if I can get information. What did I find? In the end, you see that the profile is ejercecadiz.es. It has something to do with Cadiz. You have the name of a person, which may be real or not, but unfortunately there's an email account, but here you have a phone number which starts by 34, which is from Spain, and ends with a 0, by 11. Things that you knew from just telephone number, not with an email account. How many of you think that obtaining this to activate it in your contacts to see if he has a profile picture in his WhatsApp account? What do we get from there? Maybe there's no notification about someone adding you to his or her contacts. So the surprise that we found is that this person, the name matches, and I mentioned something about Cadiz. So you see someone who is at the beach, doing this from the beach, just laying on the sand with the laptop to obtain a lot of credit card numbers from people around. But just with your telephone number, with your email address, how many of you would like to try which is the password related to that email account? How many of you would like to use this have been pawned, which is related to a mobile device in an internet service that can be vulnerated, pawned? Bad luck, because there's nothing. But what we are hackers, right? If it's not in this page, it may be in another very famous one, which starts by P and ends in Gene. We have to look in that page too, pastebin. So if someone has done the dirty job for you, why do we do it? You can see there's an email address which actually matches with the one that we may be looking for. Look the date, 29th of June. There's an email account that appears something about 1982 that can give you a hint about the age of this person. I don't know what 1982 could mean, but you can imagine what it can be. The next step, once we have this email account, how many of you believe that going to Gmail and introduce that email is a good idea? Never, because they will display an alert saying that someone has tried to connect to that account. If I buy a new device, we can try this process, introducing a numberless of passwords, and Google won't display alert. So how many of you it's a very good idea to have a device to try to run these tests, because if we start to connect the vinculation of the password, all that information like the calendar, contacts, Drive, Gmail, everything will be synchronized to upload it to the cloud. That's what backups are for. Once someone enters in the account, Google offers you the option of downloading all your data from the cloud. All the data that is being uploaded to the cloud recurrently. But apart from that, if you go to the options of the Google account and you go to privacy and customization, especially privacy, until not so long ago, the activity, everything you did on the website, even if you used the private mode, was just connected to Google. If you're you're watching porn, Google will know it. It knows the history of your locations, and it knows everything you look for in YouTube, because you are giving it to them. So things that we could obtain from that. Well, we could download the V card with all the contacts, all the information on Google Drive, and apart from that, as the history of the locations is recorded, you can see then Saturday, October 26th, he took a plane or something. But if I ask you, what's this? It's a person it's a guy who lives from others. And not only with that, one thing that was quite interesting for us is the kind of research related to that email account. I don't know what we can, the date here, 26th of August, how to create an Instagram account step by step. So that's information on how is the technological profile of a person. And apart from that, videos related to Fortnite, which foreseeably can be used information to establish contact with the people and to get access to this portal for PS4. And not only with that, how many of you would like to see the kind of emails that this person may receive? Like the one you can see there, I sent pictures that you asked me for, but now you have to keep your promise and return my accounts. Here we can see that something that started with some passwords, we cannot see the end of it. This person has 49 followers, and there may be another 48 victims which may suffer something similar, which is very typical. But this investigation, from my perspective, meets the requirements of circumstantial evidence to an extent, to a limit. To what extent? To the moment in which you have user and password, and from that it starts catching the information, there would be a privacy breach to that profile, which is completely illegitimate and which may involve responsibilities for him. That's a moment, and having this information that we have, make it available of the public powers to the law enforcement agencies, so that they can continue with the research. Here we have to consider something, and the thing is that someone presents confidential evidences, because he wants to preserve it. The judge may not justify that vulnerating measure based on that confidential evidence. It's not a requirement to be done, and it's not the same when there's an anonymous writing. I cannot vulnerate fundamental rights if someone just reports about. There are some measures to be taken by public actors, but you cannot justify that vulnerating measure in that anonymous writing on in that confidential piece of news. Another fact is the nullity of an evidence. It starts if there's an appellate process and he wants to provide evidences personally, as long as from the origin it's not intended to provide it to a criminal process. Also, it's not valid that Amador, because of a suggestion or request of a public actor, is in charge of conducting that research. That won't be valid neither if they were provided. The European Court understands that the doctrine of the forbidden tree, everything that is, so if something is forbidden, everything hanging from that forbidden thing will be forbidden and will be annihilated. This is a process of a fair process, and we just have to evaluate each process to see which measures have been vulnerated and what is the interest of the process. Always, in this case, if the particular vulnerates those rights, but in the case of public powers. This also reflected in the article that I marked there, which is the article on the Anteproyecto Procesal 2012, in which an exclusivity.
So now in the digital world, this is happening more and more. The vigilante that finds camera at work and they look at the pictures to see who's the owner, and then they see it's child porn, and then the other part can say my privacy has been breached, but this is an individual, it's not law enforcement, and therefore that evidence is valid. Or similar cases, well, you receive an email involuntary from a colleague where you see that there is stealing of information, etc. So the court realizes that the evidence given by individual is valid, and this is something that happens more and more in this digital world. And there's something else. Perhaps the person doing the investigation wants to remain private, and they do not want to be involved. Well, there are different alternatives. Amador could look for a lawyer and who has a right to professional secrecy, so as to bring that evidence to law enforcement without declaring his own identity. But they are saying here, for instance, that in order to be able to take to report facts, that their reporting has a validity, but you have to have a person reporting. But in this case, we have the option that when you provide the evidence, there is another act, regulation that says that if you are aware of an illegal fact, that you can bring to the law enforcement this confidential data that will later be certified by the investigation. So what we've done throughout the whole investigation is to breach this presumption of innocence. So, and I also have a right to remain silent, and you, as the prosecution, you have the duty of proving the fact, and you cannot ask me to prove negative facts. I do not have to prove that I have not done something. It's up to you, prosecution, to prove that I have done. So all of that evidence, for it to be valid, has to be part of an oral trial that has to be public and with all the basic principles of a fair trial. And it's doubt that the assessment of the evidence brought to court, it can only be done by the judge who is perceiving those facts through his senses. So, and to finish, there's a resolution here that says that if the evidence is true, it has to, the person has to be guilty if this logical sequence is maintained, and you have to be able to reason evidence by evidence, link by link in this logical process, and the court with an evidence that's based on this evidence or circumstantial evidence, and we need to have an additional motivation. We need to have charging evidence or prosecution evidence. It has to be a legal evidence, and we bring it to a court process. There has to be a logic behind it. We need to have sufficient evidence. It's not enough to have circumstantial evidence, but it has to be a circumstantial evidence pointing to a person, and inference is not open. If from our investigations there are 4 or 5 people that meet those criteria, you will not be able to certify which of those persons, and therefore this circumstantial evidence has to lead to a single person, and it has to be enough to be able to go against this sort of innocent presumption of innocence that we all have. For me, it's been an honor to provide support to Amador in this investigation, and I'm open to questions. We're both open for questions. Hi, good evening. Thanks for the talk. Very, very well done. I wanted to ask a question. Throughout the whole process, there comes a point where it's clear in the user password. That's the tricky point. But I see a different path. I get to where you've got without introducing user and password, and then I report it, and it is the judge that should ask Google who is behind that email address. That happens. It may take a while, but it does happen. So I think it's an easier path, because if Google is telling you who is the user, you have the name, you have the mobile, then you have all of the evidence. The way I see it personally, it's clear where we get to, and I agree with you. That's the point where if you go beyond that point, you lose everything that you've done before. You can go to the beach and beat him up, but nothing else. So for me, the crucial issue is when you bring this evidence, it's up to law enforcement to check those facts. It's not enough that those facts lead the judge to have the motivation to go against this presumption of innocence. So we need the certification of that investigation. We need to repeat the process that he has gone through. So you go through the whole process again, you reach the same conclusions, and that's when the judge is able to ask for Google for information, or they may, or the judge has the right to sort of to go against this constitutional right. When you ask the judicial expert or the technician, would that be enough motivation for the judge to make that request? Because if you have a one-side technician or a party technician, you could ask them to check this fact, and from that technical study, you could request the Google for that. Yes, the expert will certify what has already been proven, but yes, it is telling us that it is law enforcement who must certify those facts, and if the expert, if there is a counter expert or the judge determines that you need specific experts in a specific area, but it's up to these authorities, public authorities, to check those facts. It's not the expert from one party that can do that. So it's up to law enforcement, really. Yes, I believe they are the ones that, with those facts that are brought to their attention or reported to them, they become aware of a criminal or penal action, and they have the possibility to see if the other 38 different profiles are other 48 potential victims, because that could be very much the case. Hi, good evening. I wanted to ask whether it's feasible to send a link, thus getting his IP address and bring it to the court authorities or the trial process, or is that not legal? Well, an IP address doesn't identify one person, but just a device. It can give you information about who is the service provider, and perhaps they are sort of careless enough to have done that from home. But an IP address does not identify one person, and we have not mentioned this, but perhaps it would have been interesting as well to investigate or to look for gaming fora, because very often in Fortnite fora you see IP addresses, and you'd be surprised because sometimes you have the personal phone numbers that they post there to get quickly in touch with other users. So it is true that an IP address, at least to know which is the service provider, there's always a subscriber behind that account. So, and certainly that could. Yes, we are seeing that the individuals, and when it comes to recordings, there are recordings in which people admit to having committed illegal acts, but then that is not accepted because they're actually sort of that goes against your right not to declare, so to remain silent. So you have to certify that with external facts, and so the IP would be another circumstantial evidence, because it doesn't identify a specific person. It is up to the judge to make sure that IP with a date and a time is connected with that person. So yes, that's another circumstantial evidence that could be brought to court. Yes, and there's always that when you enter, you can check the 10 or 20 last accesses, and it tells you the IP address, and with that you can also, with a combination, you can geoposition or geolocate somebody. Yes, that would be another circumstantial evidence that you can bring to the court process. It's an IP that perhaps will not give you enough information to you because it doesn't have enough context, but it could be of interest and act as one more circumstantial evidence when you can connect it to the phone number. But I think that law enforcement, if I'm not mistaken, with an IP address, they can ask for information to the service provider, and depending on how serious the crime that's being dealt with, so they won't give that information lightly, but depending on the seriousness, they will. Thank you. So, regarding this last question, if an individual sends a tracker or through email to get the IP from an electronic, if they use some form of tracking or send them an electronic beacon or whatever, they are actually scamming or fooling the other user. Yes, and a beacon is it gives you location specifically, so it breaches rights. And I've recently read an article regarding this topic, because there could be professionals that could do that service for you, detectives, etc. So I think that's a sort of a breach of privacy and movement of the other person, and you're actually provoking that. So yes, so even if it's an individual, if you connect the pixel 0 on the web page, you are fooling them and you're turning them into victims. Yes, we're trying to justify something in our view that could be justifiable if it's contributed to a process, but there are more invasive processes that could lead to the identification of a person, but it's no good, because then you break the chain and we've gone too far. So that's why we try to respect the law up to that point, and we bring it to court for the judge to decide whether with that user and that password we can identify the person. So as a summary, for an individual who comes across a situation like this, if you get to the point where you're not going to prove the password that you found in a past bin, then you have to, with the email address, the phone number and the name, you try to contribute everything. You have to certify the initial fact, the initial action, the exchange of messages, perhaps a third trusted party, that so that fact cannot be questioned. And from then on, you have to look for evidence through circumstantial evidence and make sure it follows the sequence. Because if the point comes where you have to breach a fundamental right, that's the point where you have to stop and bring it to law enforcement. Okay, more than a question, I'm actually just curious. What happened? I think he gave the account back. I don't want to know, he didn't tell me. He gave it back, and I think the profile in Instagram has disappeared. So, and beyond that, I don't know. But I do know that law enforcement I think that they are sort of aware. But I really don't know what happened though. But for sure, I can tell you that the account was given back, and I think there was no problem with banking fraud. But that's as far as I know. So, if there are no further questions, thanks very much.